Clear your desk by the end of the day, Holly. Human resources will handle the exit paperwork. The words on my computer screen blurred as I read them again. After 5 years of dedicated service to Summit Edge Logistics, all I got was a cold, impersonal email. 3 days. That's all I had taken to bury my father. 3 days of approved bereavement leave. We need people who prioritize their work, the email continued, as if attending my father's funeral was some casual social event I'd chosen over filing quarterly reports. I sat back in my chair, the leather letting out a small squeak in the silence of early morning. The Boise office was still mostly empty. Outside, the sky was just beginning to lighten with the first traces of dawn. I had come in early, determined to catch up after my brief absence. My name is Holly Peterson, and until about 2 minutes ago, I was the regional team lead of the highest performing division at Summit Edge Logistics. At 34, I had built more than just a career. I had built a team that felt like family. We celebrated birthdays, stood by each other through hard times, and pushed one another to grow, to succeed, to reach higher. I looked around at my desk. The small cactus my team gave me last Christmas. A framed photo of all of us at the company retreat. Handwritten thank you notes from people I had mentored over the years. 5 years of my life, reduced to a handful of keepsakes that could fit in a single cardboard box. The termination notice attached to the email bore the name of Dan Weaver, my direct supervisor. The same Dan who had personally approved my bereavement leave just last week. Failure to maintain adequate presence during critical operational periods. That's what it said. My father's death, apparently, had fallen during one of those unnamed, undefined critical periods. I didn't cry. I didn't slam my fist on the desk. I didn't march into Dan's office, demanding answers. Instead, I pulled out my phone, took a photo of the email, and forwarded it to my personal account. Then I shut down my computer. I stood up, and I began packing my things, methodically, silently. By the time others started trickling into the office, my desk was already halfway cleared. Tanya from accounting was the first to notice. "Holly, what's happening?" she asked, eyes wide as she spotted the box. "I've been let go," I said simply.
"What? Why?"
Apparently, taking approved bereavement leave to bury my father wasn't demonstrating proper work priorities. Tanya's face changed from confusion to outrage. "That's not right. Have you talked to Paula? The regional manager should know about this." "No," I replied, gently wrapping the little cactus in newspaper. "I'm not going to fight it, but I won't forget it either." When you work closely with people for years, you learn to read their faces. As I continued to pack, more of my team began to arrive. Jason was the first of my direct reports to hear. His usual grin disappeared in an instant. "This is bull," he started, but I stopped him with a slight shake of my head. "It's done, Jason." Dan made his decision. "But we just finished the Newbrook merger last month. Profits are up 18% this quarter because of you." I smiled, quietly, sadly. Apparently, that wasn't enough. By 9:30, all 7 of my core team members had gathered around my desk in a heavy, wordless show of solidarity. Ethan, our logistics specialist, usually the most stoic of the group, looked like he was seconds away from punching a wall. Veronica, our client relations manager, couldn't hold back her tears. She was crying, openly and without shame. Behind them stood Michael, Louise, Diane, Gabriella, and Kayla. Each wore a different expression, but all were laced with disbelief, confusion, and a rising fury. "You can't leave," Veronica said, her voice cracking. "The Wilson account renewal is next week. The Hernandez shipping contract is still in negotiations. None of us knows the system like you do." I sealed the last edge of tape on my box. Dan should have thought of that before he fired me for attending my father's funeral. The words dropped like a thunderclap. The weight of them hung in the air between us. My father, gone just a week ago. The funeral soil still fresh in the ground. And now this betrayal, this gut-wrenching dismissal from a company I had poured my soul into. "I need everyone back at their desks," came a sharp voice slicing through the moment. Dan Weaver stood behind us, arms crossed, his narrow face set in a hard, disapproving frown. We have deadlines to meet. No one moved. Now, he added, his voice rising just slightly, the pressure clear. After a long, charged pause, my team began to return to their desks. One by one, they walked away, each giving me a silent look. A message passed through the eyes. We see this. We won't forget. Dan approached me, his voice dropping low. This could have been handled with more discretion if you'd waited until the end of the day to pack up. I met his gaze, unflinching. Like the discretion you showed in firing me over email after approving my bereavement leave? His jaw clenched. Business needs change rapidly. Summit Edge needs people who understand that priorities shift. Your father's passing was unfortunate, but don't, I warned, my voice as sharp and cold as broken glass. Don't finish that sentence, Dan. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Was it guilt? Doubt? Then, as if retreating behind armor, he straightened and adjusted his tie. Human Resources is expecting you. Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. I picked up my box. Don't worry, I said. I won't make a scene. But remember this moment, Dan. You might find it important later. The Human Resources office felt like a hospital room. White walls. No color. No warmth. Barbara Kent, the HR representative, wore a sympathetic but practiced expression. She was still fairly new, only 6 months into the company, and I could tell she was uncomfortable, uneasy even. I'm sorry about this, Holly, she said quietly, sliding the separation papers across the desk. And I'm very sorry about your father. Thank you, I replied, eyes scanning the documents. Standard severance. 2 weeks' pay. A non-disparagement clause. A reminder about my non-compete agreement. 6 months where I couldn't work for direct competitors. Barbara hesitated, then asked, Is there anything I should know about why this happened? Her voice was careful. This seems abrupt. I considered what to say. Then I chose truth. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. This is the email.
She leaned in.
I showed her the screen. 3 days of approved bereavement leave, and I'm fired for not prioritizing work. Barbara's professional mask cracked. Her eyes widened in disbelief. This is the actual termination notice? She asked. Just an email. No performance improvement plan. No documented warnings. No, nothing. She frowned, quickly scribbling something onto her legal pad. I need to verify some things with the legal department. Would you excuse me for a moment? As she stepped out, I turned to the window. From this floor, I could see the Boise River winding its way through the city. My father had loved that river. He taught me how to fish there. He taught me patience there, standing in cold waters, waiting while the current rushed past our knees. The river moves, Holly girl, he used to say. But the rocks stay steady. Be like the rocks. Barbara returned 20 minutes later, her face a practiced mask of neutrality. But her tight-lipped smile, it told me everything. Nothing would change. Unfortunately, Idaho is an at-will employment state, she began. The company is within its rights too. I understand. I cut in, signing the documents without a fight, without a word of protest. Summit Edge can do whatever it wants, just like I can. Barbara hesitated. Then she lowered her voice, barely above a whisper. Off the record, this isn't right. If you wanted to pursue action. I don't, I said firmly, shutting that door before it even creaked open. But thank you. As I walked through the main office for the last time, I could feel eyes on me, silent, somber, respectful. My team watched me leave, their faces heavy with sadness and disbelief. I gave them a small, brave smile, my final gesture as their leader. Outside, the September air clung to my skin with a strange, unexpected warmth. I placed my box gently in the trunk of my car and climbed into the driver's seat, allowing the weight of it all to finally settle in. My phone chimed.
Once.
Then again. Then a flood. Jason, this is wrong. Veronica, are you okay? Can we meet up later? Ethan. Dan's a spineless jerk. The team is furious. More messages poured in. each one an eruption of support, outrage, and fierce loyalty. These people weren't just coworkers. They were my professional family. I started the engine, but my mind had already begun to turn. I wouldn't fight Summit Edge directly. I wouldn't sue, even though I probably had the grounds. No, I would be strategic, patient, like my father taught me. The rocks stay steady, while the river rushes past.
My phone rang.
The caller ID made my pulse jump. Hank Fleming, CEO of Vertex Transport Systems, Summit Edge's biggest competitor. We'd met at a conference last year, kept in touch. He'd been trying to recruit me for months. It was time to return his call. The Vertex Transport Systems office was everything Summit Edge wasn't. Open concept design, collaborative energy, towering windows framing the Boise skyline. Hank greeted me with a firm handshake. A burly man with a silver beard and eyes that didn't miss a thing. "I've been hoping you'd call," he said, guiding me into a sleek conference room. Though I didn't expect it would be under these circumstances. Word travels fast in our industry. Hank already knew I'd been fired. He just didn't know the details until I showed him the email. "That's not just bad management," he said, frowning. "That's inhumane. Bereavement leave exists for a reason." "Summit Edge has always valued profits over people," I replied. "I just never thought I'd be one of the casualties." Hank leaned in. His tone turned serious. "I'll be blunt, Holly.
I want you on my team.
Vertex is expanding our Pacific Northwest operations. We need someone with your expertise." Then the offer. Division Director. My heart skipped. It was a major step up. More responsibility. More influence. Better pay. "What about my non-compete?" I asked, cautious but intrigued. Hank smiled, calm and confident. "Our legal team reviewed it. It's overly broad, likely unenforceable. And if Summit Edge tries to push it, we'll cover any legal expenses." I took a breath. "I'll need to think about it." "Of course," Hank nodded. "Take the weekend. We'll talk specifics on Monday." That evening, I met up with Veronica and Jason at Riverfront Brewing, a quiet pub far from downtown, away from any wandering Summit Edge eyes. They arrived together, tension still clinging to them. "How are you holding up?" Veronica asked, sliding into the booth beside me. "I'm all right," I said, doing my best to sound grounded. "It's been a rough couple of weeks, but I'll land on my feet." Jason scoffed. "Dan's a fool. The office is already spiraling. Nobody can find the Henderson proposal files. And no one's been granted access to the systems you ran." I took a sip of water, suppressing a bitter smile. "That sounds like a Dan problem." Veronica leaned forward, her voice urgent. "It's more than that. Everyone's talking, not just our team. People are furious about what happened to you." I hadn't expected that. "Not really." "You were respected, Holly," Jason said, his tone steady. "Not just by us. The way Dan handled this? People are scared now. If they do this to you, their star team lead, what would they do to anyone else?" Veronica nodded slowly. "Paula's been asking questions. The regional manager looks worried." "Good," I replied simply. As we continued talking, more texts began to pour in from my former team. Stories of chaos, frustration, and outright anger at upper management. Summit Edge was already feeling the ripple of my absence. "What will you do now?" Jason asked. I hesitated, then admitted, "I've had an offer from Vertex." Their eyes widened instantly. "But your non-compete," Veronica said quickly. "Those aren't always enforceable." She knew. She dealt with contracts every day and understood the legal angles, especially when a termination comes without cause. That's what Vertex's legal team said too. But it's still a risk. Jason's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, frowning. "Dan's calling an emergency meeting tomorrow morning."
Saturday.
He's never done that before. "The Wilson account review is due Monday," Veronica added. "And no one can find your analysis files." I gave a small, knowing smile. Those files were properly stored on the company server, but my system for organizing them wasn't exactly user-friendly. It wasn't meant to be confusing, but I couldn't lie. There was a tiny flicker of satisfaction in knowing they were struggling without me. I should get going, I said, reaching for my purse. Early appointment tomorrow. As I stood, Jason looked at me seriously. Holly, if you did go to Vertex, hypothetically speaking, would they be hiring? I paused, looked between them both. Hypothetically?
Yes.
They're expanding fast. The glance exchanged between Jason and Veronica spoke volumes. Saturday morning, I met with Vincent Torres, an employment attorney a friend had recommended. His office was modest, but refined. Framed diplomas from prestigious law schools lined the walls. I laid everything out. The email, the termination notice, my concerns. Vincent adjusted his glasses, studying the papers. This, he said, is textbook wrongful termination. Firing someone for taking approved bereavement leave? That could easily be seen as a breach of contract and a violation of good faith. I'm not looking to sue, I clarified. I just want clarity on the non-compete clause. Vincent nodded, scanning the document carefully. This is extremely restrictive. 6 months of prohibition from working with competitors within a 300-mile radius? That's basically telling you to leave the industry or move across the country. Is it enforceable? I asked. In Idaho? It's questionable, especially under these circumstances. Courts don't usually uphold non-competes when the employer acts in bad faith. He leaned back in his chair. What's your plan, Holly? Vertex Transport Systems has offered me a position. Higher pay, better title. Vincent gave a small nod. Summit Edge would have to prove that you're causing them measurable harm by working for Vertex. But considering they terminated you, that's a hard case to make. He jotted some notes. Proceed with caution. But don't let this clause stop you from making a living. Over the weekend, my phone lit up constantly. Text after text from my old team. The emergency Saturday meeting had been tense. Dan had pressured everyone to take on extra work to cover my absence, without any talk of increased compensation. The Wilson account files?
Found.
But no one could make sense of my unique analysis method. By Sunday night, my decision was made. Monday morning, I picked up the phone. Hank, I accept your offer, I said. But I have one condition. Name it, he replied immediately. I want to build my own team. If any of my former colleagues from Summit Edge apply to Vertex, I want them to be given fair consideration. Absolutely, Hank said without hesitation. If they're half as talented as you, we'd be lucky to have them. That afternoon, I signed my contract with Vertex, Division Director of Pacific Northwest Operations. The salary? 40% higher than what I made at Summit Edge. Better benefits. A sign-on bonus. And a future I had control over again. As I stepped out of the Vertex offices, I glanced at my phone. 7 new messages, one from each core member of my former team. They all wanted to meet for coffee privately. Tuesday morning, I sat tucked away in a quiet corner of a small downtown cafe, waiting. Jason arrived first, then Veronica. One by one, Ethan, Louise, Diane, Gabriella, and Kayla filed in until we had filled 2 tables, pulled tightly together. Summit Edge is imploding, Ethan said, no hesitation, no small talk. Dan's micromanaging everyone. Paula's breathing down his neck. And clients are asking questions. The Wilson account is threatening to pull out, Veronica added. They asked why you weren't handling their renewal. I took a slow sip of coffee, listening as each of them took turns, stories of disarray, confusion, and management scrambling to contain a storm of their own making. We heard you've accepted a position at Vertex, Jason said at last. Everyone fell silent, their eyes locked on me. News travels fast, I murmured. We want to come with you, Veronica said, steady and sure. The others all nodded. I looked around at their faces. These were good people, all with secure positions at Summit Edge. You all have good jobs. Are you sure you want to risk that? What security? Lou replied, bitterly. If they'd fire you for attending your father's funeral, none of us are safe. Vertex is hiring, I said cautiously. I can't make any promises, but I can refer you. You'd each have to apply formally. We already have, Gabriella revealed, pulling a stack of printed confirmation emails from her bag. All 7 of us. Yesterday. I blinked, stunned. You applied before even talking to me? "We trust you, Holly," Kayla said, her voice calm. "Where you go, we go." A rush of emotions swelled in my chest. Gratitude, loyalty, vindication. Let me make some calls. The following Monday, my phone rang at exactly 7:30 a.m. The caller ID, Paula McCormick, Summit Edge's regional manager. "Holly," she began, her tone trying and failing to sound composed. "We need to talk." "Good morning, Paula," I said, keeping my voice even. "What can I do for you? I've just received 7 resignation letters, all from your former team, all effective immediately." A pause followed, tense and loaded. "Care to explain?" I took a breath, slow and controlled. "I'm not sure what kind of explanation you're expecting. I don't work for Summit Edge anymore. They're all going to Vertex, where you just started as division director." Her voice sharpened. "This doesn't look coincidental. People make career choices for many reasons, Paula. Maybe you should ask Dan why your top-performing team is leaving all at once." "This is about your termination, isn't it?" she asked, her voice softening with regret. "I've reviewed the situation. Dan didn't consult me before letting you go. I would never have approved it. That's between you and Dan," I replied coolly. "Though, I'm curious why Summit Edge's regional manager wasn't involved in the firing of a team lead." Paula sighed, deep and heavy. "Dan claimed it was an urgent performance issue. Said it couldn't wait for me to return from the Seattle conference. I trusted his judgment." A beat passed. Clearly, that was a mistake. I said nothing. I let the silence settle and sting. "Holly," she finally continued, "I'm prepared to offer you your position back. A 10% raise. A formal apology. We need your expertise. The Wilson account is about to walk." "I appreciate the offer, Paula, but I've accepted a position elsewhere. We'll match whatever they're paying. Add 15%. "It's not about the money." "Then what would it take?" There it was, desperation, raw in her voice. 7 key employees walking out is devastating, she continued. The operational knowledge alone. It would take time travel, I interrupted, voice cutting sharp. Back to when my father died. And someone at Summit Edge showing basic human decency instead of punishing me for grieving. The line went dead quiet. "I need to go, Paula. I start my new position today, and I don't want to be late." "Your non-compete," she began. "Feel free to have your legal team contact mine," I said, flat and final. Though they might want to review the circumstances of my termination first. After hanging up, I drove to Vertex's office, arriving early to prepare for the day ahead. Hank was waiting in the lobby, beaming. "We're considering all 7 of your former colleagues," he said. "Their qualifications are outstanding. Interviews start Wednesday." "Thank you," I said, with genuine warmth. "Thank you for giving them a fair chance." "Fair chance." Hank chuckled. "Holly, they're top-tier talent. Summit Edge's mistake is our gain." 2 days later, another call came through. This time, from Barbara Kent, Summit Edge's HR department. "I shouldn't be telling you this," Barbara said quietly. "But Dan Weaver has been placed on administrative leave, pending review." She glanced around, then added, "Paula is launching an internal investigation into management practices, especially around bereavement and time-off policies." "That's good to hear," I said, and I meant it. "The board of directors is involved now," Barbara continued. "Losing an entire specialized team to a competitor has triggered some serious alarm bells. They're reviewing all terminations from the past year." By Friday, all 7 of my former team members had received and accepted offers from Vertex. We met for dinner that night, gathering around a long table, raising glasses in celebration. "To new beginnings," Veronica said. "And to Holly," Jason added, "who taught us what real leadership looks like." The following week, a formal letter from Summit Edge arrived at my new office. It acknowledged my wrongful termination and included a settlement offer to avoid litigation. I accepted it, not for the money, but for the recognition. For the official admission that they'd been wrong. That same day, the Wilson account signed with Vertex. They brought their business to us the moment they learned their preferred team was now under my direction. The river had moved, but we had remained steady, just like my father always taught me. 3 months later, I stood at the front of Vertex's largest conference room, presenting our quarterly results to the executive team. The numbers didn't need embellishment. They spoke for themselves. 30% growth in our division. For major client acquisitions, 3 of them former Summit Edge accounts. Operational efficiencies had improved so dramatically, we had reduced costs by 22%. Exceptional work, Holly, Hank said as I wrapped up. You and your team have exceeded every projection. I smiled. The team deserves the credit. They've been nothing short of remarkable. After the meeting, I returned to my office, only to find all 7 of my core team members waiting for me, smiling, surrounding a cake. What's this? I asked, laughing. It's been exactly 3 months since we all jumped ship together, Jason said. We're calling it our Independence Day. I laughed, full and free. You're all ridiculous. But happy, Veronica chimed in. Seriously, Holly, everyone's thriving here. And she was right. Each of them had grown into their roles at Vertex. They had more autonomy, better tools, and finally, recognition for their real value. Most importantly, they were respected. Treated like people, not productivity machines. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Summit Edge Logistics announces restructuring amid client exodus. I showed the headline to the group. I heard they lost the Hernandez contract last week, Ethan said as he sliced the cake. That's like 20% of their Pacific Northwest revenue. Dan's gone, Luis added. Cleared out his office on Friday. Paul's trying to salvage what's left. I felt no joy in their downfall. Only justice. The company wasn't crumbling because we left, it was crumbling because leadership failed its people. Because they created a culture where grieving a parent was seen as a lack of commitment. I raised my water glass. To Summit Edge, I said. May they finally learn that a company is only as strong as how it treats its people. And to Holly, Gabriella added, lifting her glass, who showed us we deserved better. 6 months after joining Vertex, I received a lunch invitation I hadn't expected from Paula McCormick. She had left Summit Edge. Now she was working for a consulting firm that specialized in organizational culture. We met at a quiet restaurant overlooking the Boise River. Her demeanor had changed. She looked lighter. The lines around her eyes, once always tense, had softened. Thank you for meeting me, she said gently. I wanted to apologize properly for what happened. You weren't directly responsible, I replied. No, she admitted, but I created the environment that made it possible. She exhaled deeply. After you and your team left, everything fell apart. The board brought in external consultants. The report wasn't flattering, not for any of us in leadership. I listened silently. Summit Edge is being acquired by Meridian Shipping, she revealed, at a fraction of its previous value. They're basically buying the client list and whatever physical assets are left. I wasn't surprised. Clients had been slipping away for months. Talent had bled out like water from a cracked foundation. What about Dan? I asked. Still unemployed, last I heard. His reputation, well, she paused. Let's just say your story has traveled. I had never gone out of my way to broadcast what happened, but I never hid it either. When people asked why I left Summit Edge, I told the truth, plain and simple. I've learned a lot, Paula said. Now, I help companies avoid the mistakes we made. But I still wonder. She looked at me, the question hanging in her expression before she finally gave it voice. Was it worth it? Walking away quietly instead of fighting. I thought about my team. Thriving. Motivated. Finally treated with respect. I thought about the clients who followed us, and the results we now delivered. I thought about my father, the man who taught me that sometimes the strongest response isn't the loudest one. Yes, I said softly. The results speak for themselves. 1 year after that cold, impersonal email turned my world upside down, Vertex named me Executive Vice President of Operations for the entire Northwest region. My division had become the company's crown jewel, efficient, innovative, and home to the highest employee satisfaction scores in the organization. Justice, vindication, peace, and above all, purpose. Each of my 7 team members had been promoted as well. Jason now led his own division. Veronica had taken the reins of our client relations strategy and completely transformed it from the ground up. Where once we had relied on templated scripts and impersonal service standards, she introduced a more human, empathy-driven approach that emphasized long-term relationships, honest communication, and responsiveness tailored to each client's specific needs. Her methods didn't just improve our retention rates, they changed how we were perceived in the industry. Within months, Veronica's name was circulating in executive circles, her ideas becoming a benchmark for client engagement. She was invited to speak at conferences, featured in trade publications, and her innovative work earned her not only accolades, but the respect of peers across the sector. The rest of the team followed suit. Each one of them stepped into roles where their skills weren't just utilized, they were nurtured and amplified. Ethan developed a new logistics tracking system that drastically reduced delivery delays and errors. Louise took over vendor partnerships and turned them into long-term alliances built on transparency and trust. Diane found her voice in leading strategic planning sessions and proved to be a natural motivator. Gabriella revolutionized our internal training protocols, building a mentorship pipeline that became the envy of our competitors. And Kayla, once underestimated, had risen to become a team lead herself, fostering the same supportive culture we had built together. For the first time in their careers, each of them was seen for their potential, not just their productivity. They weren't just functioning, they were flourishing. Then, on the 1-year anniversary of my termination from Summit Edge, I received a small, unexpected package at my office. The handwriting on the label was familiar, neat, careful. I opened it slowly, curiosity prickling along my skin. Inside, nestled gently in recycled brown paper, was my old cactus plant. It had grown a little since I'd last seen it, its once small arms now a touch fuller, its color a healthy, vibrant green. It was still thriving, despite everything. Tucked beside it was a folded note written on Summit Edge stationery. Rescued this from your desk.
Thought you might want it back now.
Summit Edge closes for good next week. Barbara Kent. Rescued this from your desk.
Thought you might want it back now.
Summit Edge closes for good next week. That was all the note said. Handwritten in Barbara Kent's unmistakably careful print, equal parts formal and kind. The moment I read it, something inside me paused. I looked at the cactus in the box, my little green survivor. It was slightly larger now, the spines thicker, the pot worn but intact. A plant that required almost nothing to live, and yet it had flourished. I gently lifted it from the packaging and walked it to the window of my office. The afternoon sun was beginning to cast its golden glow through the tall panes of glass. I set the cactus down on the sill, turning it slightly so it could soak in the light. It sat there, quiet, proud, resilient. Like me, it had once been left behind, something small and overlooked, something deemed unnecessary when priorities shifted. And like me, it had survived. It had found a better place to grow, a place where it could stretch toward the sun without fear of being uprooted. That evening, I took a slow drive through the city, past familiar streets and old intersections, until I reached the Boise River. The same place where my father and I used to fish on early Saturday mornings, him in his weathered hat, me bundled in a jacket too big for my frame. I stepped out of the car and walked down to the riverbank, letting the cool breeze sweep across my face. The sound of the water reached me first, steady and unhurried, rushing softly over the rocks as it always had. It was a sound that hadn't changed, even when everything else had. I stood there, taking in the scene, the dusky light, the shadows between the reeds, the ripple of the current wrapping itself around the steady stones beneath the surface. And I thought back to the moment that had changed everything. 1 year ago, a single email, cold, final, no warning, no conversation, no human touch, just a sentence on a screen that ended 5 years of loyalty, of leadership, of heart. It was meant to be the end of my story. But instead, it became the beginning. But that one moment, an impersonal, emotionless email meant to dismiss me, had unknowingly set something much larger into motion. It had pushed me off a ledge I never would have dared to step away from on my own. And instead of falling, I had flown. What had started as a painful ending had grown into something greater, something meaningful, not just for me, but for every person who had stood beside me when things fell apart. For every teammate who believed in my leadership enough to walk away from comfort and security, to take a leap into the unknown, simply because they trusted me, because they believed we could build something better together. I stood there, the river whispering around me, its surface dancing with reflected starlight. "You were right, Dad," I said softly, the words carried by the wind. "Sometimes you don't need to force the current. You just stay steady and let the river do its work. Let time do its quiet magic. Let injustice unravel itself. Let truth rise without needing to shout." As I looked back on the path I'd taken, from being discarded, cut loose without warning, to rising again as an executive vice president, I saw the full arc for what it was. Not a story of vengeance. Not really. But of resilience. Of reclamation. My greatest act of revenge had never been watching Summit Edge crumble under the weight of its own arrogance.
No.
My revenge had been in what I chose to build when I was free from it. Something stronger. Something lasting. A workplace where mourning the death of a loved one wasn't seen as weakness. Where human moments were honored, not penalized. Where people weren't measured solely by their output, but recognized for their spirit, their contribution, their whole selves. Where leadership was never about control, but about lifting others higher, about opening doors, not guarding them. I didn't need to destroy what had hurt me. I didn't have to scorch the earth behind me. Because the best revenge isn't destruction. It's creating something so good, so unshakably strong, that it makes the old system irrelevant. It wasn't revenge. It was evolution. A quiet, steady transformation that didn't need noise or spectacle to prove its worth. It was the kind of change that speaks for itself, measured not in what was destroyed, but in what was built in its place. A better system. A healthier culture. A stronger, more human-centered way of doing things. By simply rising, we had rendered the old way irrelevant, outdated, ineffective. A relic of a leadership style that could no longer survive in the light of what we had created. My father would have been proud of that. Not just because of a title I carried or the success that followed, but because I had held true to what he taught me. That strength isn't always loud. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is endure. To hold your ground when everything around you is rushing, shifting, falling apart. To stay rooted in who you are and what you know is right. And to let time, like water, carve the truth into the world around you. As I looked toward the horizon, toward whatever came next, I felt something unexpected. No bitterness. No lingering anger. Only gratitude. Gratitude for every misstep, every heartache, every betrayal that once felt like an ending. Even the pain, especially the pain. Because I had come to understand something deep and quiet and true. That sometimes the very worst things that happen to us are the ones that carry us to the most beautiful places. Not despite the hardship, but because of it. If we stay grounded, if we don't give in to rage or fear, if we remain as steady as the rocks, unmoved by the chaos, the river of change will do its work. And eventually, it will carry us exactly where we were meant to go.